Hello, Legacy Sabers, Marsh here. So today we're going to talk about try catch, which is a very special thing for error checking in our program. Our essential question today, how can I make my program not crash when an error occurs? So we're trying to prevent those runtime errors that can sometimes happen. So exception handling is ultimately what we're doing. Exception handling is the process of responding to unexpected events that occurred to prevent a program crashing. So common errors that can occur that cause our program to crash: dividing by zero, incorrect type of input, going out of bounds on a string. There does exist other also exceptions or errors that we can run into, but right now, those are the ones that we currently have access to in our programming. So some terminology we need to get through. When a runtime error occurs, Java throws an exception. Throwing an exception is basically Java signaling that something unusual has happened. There is an error that has happened and it needs to tell me that it cannot continue on. Today, we're going to learn how to catch an exception, or basically respond to the exception by writing code to specifically deal with it. Sometimes people will call this handling an exception. So catching and handling are kind of both the same kind of thing, depending on what you're seeing. So syntax of a try catch, which is what we're looking at. What you'll see is you'll see the word try, and then you'll see a curly brace. You'll have some statements inside there, curly brace, and then catch exception E, and curly brace, some statements, curly brace. First of all, the statements that are inside the try, that's the code that may cause an error. We are trying to see if it causes an error. If it doesn't cause an error, it's just going to move past the catch and just continue on its merry way. Because usually there are statements below the catch that are happening. Whoops. There we go. The code that's inside of catch, the statements, that is how we respond to the error. That's how we're catching the exception that we are finding. Usually it's probably a system out print line saying an error has occurred or something like that. Inside the catch, there is a parameter, and it's the exception that it plans on catching. E is the name of the exception. When you just put exception E, it catches all exceptions. There is ways to basically personalize exceptions. So you can have like division by zero exception being caught differently than input mismatch being caught differently. However, if you just put exception E, that catches you all possible exceptions that could happen in that particular area. So for example, in my try, if I have code that's running and it causes an exception, an error, immediately the catch will happen. Okay, catch runs and then it continues along with the statements that are outside the try catch. Let's take a look at an example. So I have try catch. So I've created num, which is 5. I'm going to make my laser pointer. There you go. I made num, he's 5. Made num2 0. So num3 is 5 divided by 0. Now you're probably like, oh, well, Marsh, that's division by 0, right? We can't divide by 0. 0 can't be on the bottom. So what would happen is when this code runs, immediately it'll go to the catch and it'll be caught inside. So what would print out is an error has occurred. If you would not have this code right here inside the try catch, what would happen is your code would literally freeze. It would crash the computer or crash your program because you have divided by 0. So by putting this inside of a try catch, we have now prevented that from happening. Now this is a very, 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 very simple try catch example. Not very often do we reasonably divide by 0, but you could do this. Like, let's say you get user input and you're not sure if they put 0 in there. You could do this in a try catch to prevent your division by 0 problem. Why would you want to do this? Well, most common reason as of right now is that we want to prevent the user from typing in invalid input. For example, the user typing in a word when we're expecting a number. So this allows us to clean our input, for lack of a better word. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of try catch using for bad input. So first thing, I made myself my scanner. And I made a variable called num. I assigned him 0. So now we're going to try the following code. We're going to enter in a number. We're going to get that next int, and then we're going to print that number. If there is an error anywhere in the try program of those 3 lines, we're going to catch the exception. We're going to say, please type in an integer. After the try catch, we're going to say end of program. So let's say the user types in a number. Let's say they type in 13, right? So please enter a number 13. That means num becomes 13, right? And then we'll system out print your number is 13. Okay. Notice catch won't happen, right? Because there was no error to catch. Then I will end of program. I'll print that. Okay. Something that looks like that. Now, let's say, I'm going to erase it. Let's say the user types in for a number, Bob. Okay. Right here, it's going to try to get an int. It's going to be like, oh, Bob's not an int. It's going to be what's called an input mismatch exception. So what's going to happen is this is going to flag the catch. Catch is going to go, oh, I can catch that error for you. It's going to catch that exception, and we're going to print, please type an integer. And then what's going to happen is we will end of program. So we will not ever print what the num is because you lost that example, you lost that ability after that try caused an error. We will not be able to get this value. Now, here's the problem with this. Yes, this prevented the program from crashing, but if I had to use that input down here inside my statements outside this try catch, I can't use it, right? It's not going to work for us. So what if I made this try catch repeat itself over and over and over? So a try catch example for bad input that repeats until they make a good decision. So this is basically forcing the user to make a good decision. Please type in something that makes sense. So I have my scanner again. I made a num, and what I've done is I made a Boolean, kind of a flag or a sentinel value called good input, and I assigned it false to start. So what I'm going to have is a while loop that as long as good input is false, I got to repeat this. So I got my try, which is trying this code. So I'm going to enter in a number. I'm going to ask the user to. I'm going to take in an int. Notice I set good input to true. This won't happen unless this next int is okay. So I won't set good input to true until I get an int in. If I don't get an int, if there is something that's silly the user typed in, I'll catch my exception. And then I'm going to tell them to please type in an integer. Okay. And then I do have to do reader.nextLine. That's so that that enter keystroke is eaten. Otherwise, you never will be able to get the next int. So make sure whenever you do next int, next double, next boolean, next character, stuff like that, make sure you eat that enter keystroke. Otherwise, it won't ever actually find it. So let's say the user first types in Bob, just like last time. So I'll get the exception. I will get please type an integer. And then what's going to pop up again is the enter a number. Because I did not change good input. It's still false. So it's going to go back up to the while loop. It's going to be like, yep, I still have to try this code again. This time, let's say the user types in 15. So that's not going to trigger the exception to happen because it's an int. So good input starts as true. Catch is not going to happen this time. Good input's true now, so my loop stops, and I would get you typed in 15. So this is allowing the user to make a good decision. It's kind of preventing them from typing in something that you don't want to have happen. And that is the end of our notes. What you're going to want to do is go to CodeHS and click on the Try Catch Example program. I will meet you there. All right, so we're at the try catch example program on Code HS. Link was on Classroom for you to click. So first, we're going to get an integer as input from the user. We're going to prevent the user from typing something that is not an integer. And then we're going to do it again, but with a double instead. So ultimately, got my start program here. We do need to have a reader because we're trying to catch that input. So we're going to have to do import java.util.scanner. Okay. Then let's make ourselves my scanner, my reader, like so fashioned. Now, I ultimately would have done just a normal print line, and then I would have gotten the input from the user. But since we're trying to prevent the user from typing in something silly, we need to use that try catch. Plus, that's what we're practicing tonight, right? So I'm going to do try, then curly braces. Inside of my try is the code I want to, quote unquote, try. So I'm going to system out print line, my prompt to the user. Now, this code right here could be outside of the try if you wanted it to be, because that would work too, this print. But I like to put it inside the try because this is all the stuff that I'm trying. It's kind of connected, what have you, to the next int that I'm going to be doing next. So I'm going to do enter in your age. I'm going to ask for the age this time. Okay. And then, I should probably make age. I do not recommend making age inside of the try. If you make the variable age inside the try, he only exists here. That's going to be causing a problem, especially if there is not an error, which you're kind of hoping there isn't. So I'm going to do int age equals 0 outside of my try catch. That way I don't have to worry about it not existing once it leaves. So I'm going to say age equals reader dot next int. Okay. Then I'm going to go, well, what if they do something wrong? So I'm going to do exception, and then I'm going to type E. E is the name of the exception. Technically, you can actually print the exception to see what it does, what kind of exception you did actually catch. And then in here, I'm going to say system.out.println, and error has occurred. Please type in an integer, like so fashioned. Okay, let's run it. Let's see how this works. So I'm going to push run, double check my code, make sure there's no errors. Perfect. Please enter in your age. I'm going to type in 5. Nothing happens, right? Which should be because I typed in something that makes sense. Let's say we type in something that doesn't make sense. Like let's say I type in the word 5. So notice our catch has ran. Enter an error. Please type in program. Now, if I don't have that catch, we would get a system runtime error. Our program would have crashed. So I've prevented the crash. Now what I can do is outside that catch, maybe I could go, I'm going to add age plus 1. And I would say, I'm going to put that in parentheses here so it does the math for me first. Would be your age in 1 year. So something like that. Maybe it's just like telling them their age in 1 year after that. Now this is going to look a little weird. So if I type 6, it'd be 7, which makes sense. If I type in Bob, it would say 1 would be your age in 1 year because age is 0 because they type something silly in. So what I would want to do is instead of letting this just go through, I'm going to do that while loop like we discussed in our program or in our notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself a Boolean called good input. And I'm going to set it as false because I'm going to expect the user to type in something stupid. That's I know it's negative sounding, but that's ultimately what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to say while good input is equal to false, I want this to run. So I'm going to put curly braces around all of this, but I don't want the system out print line inside there. Curly brace there. So I want this try catch to repeat as many times as I need it to repeat while they're doing something good. So now what I can do, the only other thing is once I get that int and it's good, it's an integer, I do need to change good input to be true so that this loop will in fact stop. Otherwise, I'm going to get an infinite loop. So I'm going to run it. So I'm going to show you typed in 6. We're all good there. Now if I type something else in, oh no, we have an infinite loop, people. It's going forever. And here's my problem. Here's why. Because next int, once you type in an int and you press enter, that enter key is sitting in the type stream. That's a problem in our input stream. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we clear that enter key. So I'm going to say reader.next line. That's literally going to swallow that enter key up, and it's not going to allow us to get that input that we just were having a problem with. So now I have please enter your age, and it's going to do that forever until I type something that makes sense. So now I've prevented the user from doing something stupid. Okay, kind of different, right? If I wanted to change this, maybe I want to get in a double, I would change this to dot next double. And then I could make sure that the user typed in a double instead of an int. So then I would say type in double. Now, in this case, if I type in an integer in here, oops, it's going to get angry because age needs to be a double. Sorry, guys. Forgot to change my type of mine. Now, if I type in an 8, it's still going to be okay because an int can go inside of a double. So that is one thing that's kind of a little annoying there is you cannot prevent an int not going inside of a double. But again, it prevents us from typing strings. It prevents people from typing a char. It prevents that kind of thing. If I would do next int like we had, and I changed this back to an int, if I would have typed in a double in this case, so like let's say age is 5.5, I would get an error to occur. So this prevents you from someone saying, well, I'm 5.5. No, I'm sorry, but you're 5. Okay, when you're doing your program. You could do a lot of different catches. So like, let's say you are worried about multiple possible problems. You could specialize your exception. So you could say down here, you could do input mismatch exception. That in that case, you do need to do some imports, which takes a little bit longer. When you do just exception E, this allows you to catch every single kind of exception that possibly could happen, but it doesn't let you specialize. So kind of a good thing, but also if you need to specialize your program, then it'd be better to do that, break that apart. But that's something, if you are interested, you could research further. But this is really good for us to allow us to prevent the user from typing in something that we're not expecting. And it also prevents our program from crashing. And that is half the battle when we're working on programs, is you almost want a secure and safe program. And you almost, for lack of a better word, need to dummy proof your program so that users aren't typing in something that you weren't expecting. But with this, that is the end of our program in our example program today. I hope you enjoyed learning about try catch, and I will see you later, Sabers.